Okay. Welcome back to Survivor Talks with Vanity, Season 2. This is Episode 3. It is a pleasure to have you here. Before we get started, I have to give the disclaimer. If you feel triggered at any moment, and yes, we do talk about some triggering topics because we talk about trauma here, please take the time to step away, take a break, get a drink of water, and if you feel like you can, come back and join us. But today we have a special guest that I want to introduce to you. Okay, his name is Chris.
Hi, Vanity.
Hi, Chris. How are you today?
Doing good. Thank you for having me on.
So, you guys, Chris, he is a survivor of multiple suicide attempts as well as mental and physical abuse. He was estranged from both parents. They have faced profound loss, including the tragic passing of his brother to a drunk driver and the loss of someone dear during the pandemic. Through it all, Chris has found purpose in advocacy, using his voice to uplift others through his podcast, Voice for the Voiceless, as you can see. His journey is one of resilience, healing, and using his personal pain to empower others. So I welcome you again to Survivor Talks, Chris, and we're honored to have you here today.
Really appreciate that intro. Feels good to come on here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm excited to have you here because you could tell your story and share it with us, the world. So can you tell us your story?
Yeah, so I guess it starts probably when I'm about like 4 years old. That's kind of where things started getting a little messy in my family. My mom was pretty unfaithful to my dad. And the earliest memory I have of that is taking my dad at 4 years old to a man's house that my mom was staying with. So that kind of kicked off just kind of the craziness that's going on in my family now. Parents got divorced about 8 years old after my sister was born. And from there, just kind of struggled getting used to the two different households, two different birthdays, two different holidays. It just, it took me a really long time to understand why it happened. And I thought it was me for so long. I probably thought that all the way up until my first suicide attempt. 14 years old, ninth grade, we all go through those changes in high school, right? You don't know where you fit in. You don't know where you belong. And before the attempt, I was really bad with self-harming. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel something other than numbness all the time. And I would wear this insane clown posse hoodie that I had. 90-degree weather in Florida, I would wear this hoodie every single day. And it was to hide my arms because of how bad they were. It got so bad to a point where I had to start wearing ace bandages on my arm, and it took one of my friends to finally notice. One of the bandages had come undone, hanging out of my sleeve. She rolled up my sleeve and smacked my arm and called me stupid. I remember like it was yesterday. And again, it was all about feeling something. It's like, wow, so somebody sees me when I do something this messed up. Okay, where does my brain take me next? Because I don't know what my purpose in this life is. I don't feel like I belong. My parents don't see me. And for my entire childhood to young adulthood, I thought I was crazy that my parents just ignored me. But I had my grandparents even say that to me, that your parents treated you as if you were a ghost, that the only time they would ever acknowledge you was when they were screaming at you, or if you weren't paying attention to your brother or your sister or whatever it was. So fast forward to the first attempt. I had the means, had a plan and everything, and somebody caught wind of it. Basically, and it wasn't until about recently that I talked with my therapist about this and why I did it. Basically, it was where I was going to do it was at school. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. And even if it hurt the people around me, then they can feel what I felt for so long. And I wasn't rationalizing. I wasn't trying to think of what everybody else felt about it. And it was just one of those things that Thankfully, I didn't go through with it. I had a friend go to the resource officer and tell him what was going on before it happened. As I got ready to jump, resource officer tackles me to the ground. This is about 2006, 2007. So if you can remember how bad mental health resources were back then, I had 2 weeks of outpatient therapy. And I got paired with a therapist who specialized in gambling addiction. 14 years old with a therapist who specialized with a gambling addiction therapist. Um, Needless to say, I didn't take anything out of that, out of any of those sessions. I couldn't tell you one conversation we had today because usually conversations like that would stick out to you with a therapist. Um, and then just kind of fast forwarding through my teen years to my early 20s, I had basically become so numb to the point of when I was working for a supermarket chain down here, I was bitter, I was angry, I treated so many people poorly. And it was mainly just because I hated the person that I saw in the mirror every single day. And the ill relationship that my mom and I had, whether it was the mental abuse or the emotional abuse or the physical abuse, I always try to give her a chance because I wanted a loving parent. And, still to this day, almost 33 years old, I don't feel great about saying I don't have a relationship with my mom. I really don't. But at some point, you got to know when to put down boundaries with people. So going back to the end of working at the supermarket, she had basically helped me out when I tore my shoulder. I was trying to go to wrestling school, and I tore my shoulder. And it was really bad to the point of after surgery, my dad wouldn't help me at all. Like I was in this really big old sling with a big cushion underneath, so I couldn't pick up my laundry. I couldn't really dress myself properly. It was rough.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom took advantage of the situation. She said, if you come live here in Jersey with me, you won't have to pay rent. You can save up money and reset your life. So I'm like, okay, it's sounds enticing. Didn't really put much thought to it. I healed up my shoulder, lasted a little bit longer. Came back down to Florida and finished my work at the supermarket. I'm like, you know what? I need to restart. I need to do something different because working here at the supermarket and living in Florida with my dad just wasn't it.
Mm.
So moved up to Jersey with my mom. I was about, I think, 26. And, the first couple of months were fine. It was like, oh, okay, maybe this is going to be a lot different. It's, it's peaceful. I can work. I can save money and everything's okay. Then for some reason, one night, me and her get into like this gigantic argument. It ended up with her in my face for 3.5 hours of screaming. I didn't get one word in. I had a friend on my microphone and was playing the game. She came downstairs and just started screaming at me for 3 straight hours.
Wow.
And the things that she said, the things that she called me, still echo in my head, every now and again, especially when I doubt myself. And that led to my second attempt. This is pre-therapy. This is pre I want to get better. This is the Chris that wanted to die.
And how old were you at this point?
27.
27. So you're an adult.
So, again, had the means, had a plan. I was going to do it. I was done. I'm like, I can't live with a parent that just doesn't give two shits about me. I don't want to do this anymore. So I did this stupid attention-seeking thing. I wrote a suicide note on Facebook. I had it up for about 5 minutes, not even. And I deleted it immediately because, like I said, I didn't want that attention. I knew it was attention. I knew I wanted to be seen, and that was the worst way to go about it. So after I deleted it, I got 2 phone calls. First phone call was from my now tattoo artist. Basically, she's like, hey, I just want to let you know I saw what you wrote on Facebook and I saw you deleted it. I just want you to know that I care very much about you and I just want to see you do okay. I'm here if you need anything. So I'm like, okay, that is the first time I've actually heard anybody say that to me, because I'm usually the person that says that to everybody. I'm that guy for everybody else, but nobody is that person for me. And the second call came from my brother Santi, and I'll show you a picture of him after I get um, to this part. He calls me, almost says the same thing, except he says, God gave me a sign to reach out to you. He's like, we haven't talked in a long time, and I just wanted you to know that I care about you and I love you, and I want you to know that somebody gives a shit about you. No matter what is going on in your head, you matter, and somebody cares about you. So then I decided, okay, I need to go to therapy. I remember calling the clinic crying. I don't I don't cry. I don't feel like this ever. I remember talking to the assistant at the desk on the phone, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. I just need somebody to talk to. I need help. And they got me in within not even a week. First two sessions, Vanity, I kid you not, I was in tears for 2 straight hours. Didn't say one word, just crying. Because I was never told to cry when I was growing up, especially as a man. We don't do that. We don't talk about our feelings. You're weak. You're not a man if you cry. Rub dirt in it. It's fine. It's fine. So you get hit in the back of the head with something, it's fine. Get up. You're fine. And for the first time in my life, I felt like somebody actually was listening and heard everything that I was saying.
The
And
therapist.
yeah, the therapist, right. And she was one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life. And I wish I kept in contact with her when I moved down here. But she gave me strength to tell my mom I'm leaving. I can't be here around you anymore. I don't want to be in the same state. I don't want to be in the same zip code as you. I need to leave. My mom didn't like that. So she posted on Facebook. My son is leaving today. He's putting me and Chris, her boyfriend at the time, her fiance. He's putting me and Chris in a bad financial situation. Never mind my mental health and what happened to me. It's all about her. So progressing into a couple of years ago, I had a really close friend, Amy. We bonded over sunsets. That was our thing. We always sent each other sunset pictures and had a plan to go see a sunset together when she was feeling better, because she was always really sick and the doctors could never figure out why. And this is around the time of the pandemic when we weren't allowed to see our loved ones in the hospital. She went into the hospital for an operation and basically passed away before the operation was supposed to happen. That was one of the first biggest losses I've ever experienced in my life, and I didn't know really how to cope with it. When I started seeing my therapist I'm seeing now, I believe it was 2020, I think, is when I started seeing her. I don't remember the exact date. I think it was 2020. And that death happened like a couple months before I started going to therapy. And then I had another death the day of my first therapy session. It was another really close friend who, when I was working at the supermarket, helped me beyond words. She gave me rides to work. She bought me a Thanksgiving dinner one time because I didn't have the money to get any food. She did so much for me. Jess, my therapist now, gave me so much hope within myself to finally accept that my parents are never going to change, that they're never going to change because they don't want to change. They don't want to do better for themselves. So I learned boundaries. And man, when I tell you, boundaries is a hell of a thing, because you really get to see what kind of people are out there when you put up boundaries.
So with your journey, because it sounds like you have a very extensive journey from the self mutilation, the wanting the attempts, suicide attempts, and that's a real subject. I'm glad that you're here with us today, that you didn't jump and that you didn't, cut yourself so deep. That and the verbal and emotional abuse that comes from your caregiver, your mom, right? Because we know, like, with our relationships with our moms, that's the first relationship that we have, right? First earthly relationship, and we're supposed to get that nurture from them, that love, the support, all these different things, so we can grow up to be an emotional, stable, nurturing person. And when that's missing, you have a whole chain effect of different things. And now here you go, even taking this abuse, verbal abuse. It's real, y'all. Verbal abuse, the name calling. I'm assuming that that was attached to created some low self esteem, low self worth, and then even at 27, suicide ideation still going on. What was the most challenging moment in your journey out of all of that?
Learning what grief feels like, I think, was the hardest part of this journey, because the second really big loss that I have was my brother.
Mm.
Um, he passed away in 2021, and I was destroyed when it happened, because how it happened, and still to this day that lady never had any consequences.
And this was your brother that reached out and said, "Y'all don't talk all the time."
Right. And he would always make sure I had a place to go during Christmas. He'd always make sure that I'm good, and always call just a bullshitter to root me on. And he was really big supporter of the mental health group that I run, that I started. And he was the reason I started the podcast. Because he was rooting for me so hard. He's like, I want to see this grow. I'm super rooting for everything you were doing. And this is the last picture that I have with him.
Oh,
This is him right here. And I keep it next to me every day. And my friend that I lost in 2020, I have her prayer card on my wall in front of me too, because I truly believe that grieving is one of the most powerful and challenging feelings that anybody can learn.
yeah.
And the misconception behind grief is that it's just death. And it's not. It's
Right.
friendships. It's grieving the relationship of your parents, friends that have cut ties with you, friend, or a job that you may have lost. I mean, it's so many. It looks so many different ways. And you know what's the craziest part is I started learning how to grieve through Robot Chicken, believe it or not.
What's that?
So it's this claymation show on
Okay.
Adult Swim. There's an episode where a giraffe is falling into quicksand and going through the 5 stages of grief.
Oh wow.
And they go through each stage: acceptance, anger, and pleading, and everything else. And the episode ends up with a giraffe hitting the bottom of the quicksand to make it, the funny bit that it's supposed to be. But that was one of the first times that I learned how to go through grief, because I'm like, I don't understand grief. I don't understand how to feel it. I don't know what it looks like. And I learned that in high school. They showed the grief video. And I think that has been the biggest journey of my life, because like I feel death so hard. And I when I came down to Florida, one of the first things I did was reach out to Rochelle, my tattoo artist, and the placements of my tattoos on both arms, the significance in the placement of everything is where I cut. So
Mm.
this entire arm is all mental health stuff. This entire arm is all like cartoon stuff, like characters like Deadpool's my favorite character, and things of that sort. Just kind of helped mold my brain into a way where I can feel everything, but also I can get through it too.
So you got your tattoos in places where you had scars from the cutting.
Right.
And I've shared this before when people I used to self mutilate as a young adult, and those scars they can fade, but they're still there,
Still there.
right? And do you ever look back at your scars and you like before you got your tattoos, you look at your scar and they tell a story.
Yep.
What type of story does your scars tell now when you look back at those scars and you see the tattoos over them? What does it remind you of?
So one of the biggest tattoos I have is a Lincoln Park tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Chester Bennington, who took his life, was a really big
Yeah.
inspiration for me growing up. His music got me through so much, especially in high school. And when I got the tattoo done, I was basically telling Rochelle my idea of what I wanted to do with this tattoo. I'm like, I want to incorporate the semicolon in there in some fashion, and I wanted to, make sure it's unique to me. So she added his signature at the bottom of the tattoo.
Wow.
And she separated each line of the lyric that I got on here with semicolons. So that being one of the big spots that was really bad, I think one of the stories it tells me is people that went through what they went through and helped you find that light in yourself, and looking back at where that scar used to be and see light there instead, see that hope there instead. And another tattoo that I have is actually it's angel wings with my friend Amy's initials right on my wrist, because that was another spot. And every time I look down at that spot, I see her, and I see that sunshine. I see that light of the sunsets that we shared with each other. And every time I go see a sunset, it reminds me of her. Tattoos have been something for me since I got my very first one, that I didn't want to just get tattoos just to get them. And, they're really cool to look at, and you see some pretty awesome ones. And then I look at what I have, and it's like all of those are so unique to myself. And the tattoo I got for my brother on his 2-year anniversary is defeat the me of yesterday. And every time I have a bad day, I think of that quote. It's like, man, tomorrow's gonna be a better day. I'm gonna be a better version.
Your brother used to say.
Yeah.
So you said at first you wasn't so you kind of had a strange relationship with your brother?
Yeah, so when we graduated high school, just to clarify, we're not blood related.
Okay.
We became close enough to where I would take a bullet for that man, type family. And when he reached out to me, that was one of his famous sayings. And he's just like, I want you to remember these words, because I think I actually have the meaning behind it. And basically, it's just doing things differently the next day and making sure you're not making the same moves that you're making today, and finding hope in places you couldn't find it in yet today, and doing that tomorrow.
Yeah.
But him and I grew so close to each other that I think a big piece of my heart went with him.
Because y'all were really close.
Yeah.
And he was one of the ones, even when you had your moment where you cried out, because when you left that, I'm glad that you did put the your letter on Facebook, because what if you didn't, um
Because
whoever
most people
saw
go
it,
in silence.
right, and whoever saw it, the people that saw it that you shared with us, they were meant to see it,
Right.
and they contacted you right away because it
Mm-hmm.
was what you needed in that moment.
Right. And one of the other tattoos that I have, the Deadpool tattoo that I have, my therapist in Jersey, she called me a game changer because of how much work I was doing in the 3 months of our sessions. She's like, I've
Right.
never seen somebody want to get better so much in my life that you just became a completely different person in 3 months. And the last thing that she wrote on a book that she gave me was game changer. So
Game changer.
on the
That's
blade of Deadpool, I have game changer across the katana he's holding.
wow.
Yeah.
So how many tattoos do you have in total?
I think I'm at 15.
15, all on your arm?
Yeah,
They're
on my arms. Yep.
okay. It's a lot of tattoos.
Yeah.
A lot of ink, a lot of hours.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you like art then. Tattoo is art. Is that one of the things that helped you navigate your tough moments?
It did. Absolutely. It taught me grace with myself because I have a tattoo on my arm right here where it says progress, not perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I had to drill into my head because I was so harsh on myself for so long. It's like I'm doing all these steps, I'm cutting out all these people. I made boundaries with my parents. What the hell am I doing wrong? Why is things not getting better? And I remember telling Jess, I'm like, I don't know what I need to do differently. Like, I'm just so angry with myself. And she told me, she's like, you got to remember that a baby step is still a step,
Mm-hmm.
and progress is not, it's not, never going to be perfection.
Yeah.
And that was one of the tattoos that I got was because of her.
Mm. So you have a lot of meaningful sayings on your arm,
Yeah.
which is good. Every time you look down, you can you have something positive now to look at. Um, I want to kind of like go back about your mom for a bit. I know that is a tough thing. And you mentioned boundaries earlier, and I think we can't stress that enough. Boundaries are so important in every relationship. And yes, even with moms and dads or the parentals, right? What kind of boundaries did you finally put in place for you? Because the boundaries are for you.
So for the longest time, my sister has zero contact with her. She lives in Jersey with her, and she has zero contact with her. So the biggest boundary I have there is don't ask me about her.
Mm.
I'm not going to tell you. Like, don't ask me about her. And the second she crosses, I block her. And that may sound harsh to a lot of people, but she's the type of person, unfortunately, that if you give her a centimeter, she will take an entire football field.
This
And
is your mom.
this is my mom. She takes advantage of people, just to put the type of personality she has into perspective. She pretended to kidnap herself when I was about 17. Um, this is when I was about to graduate. This is when I was going into college. Um, she basically faked her kidnapping to get money from my dad, ransom money, and basically made a whole big thing. She had a manhunt after her. Um, the cops and everything found her, but no perpetrator of all these things that she said she did. Uh,
Wow.
she was a big addict, and I didn't find that out until years later, um, when she told us that she was dying of bone cancer and she was really smoking crack. Um, she's a very manipulative and controlling person, and if you don't keep her further than arm's length, she takes advantage any way that she can.
So it sounds like there was some psychological games there.
Yeah, and it was on the physical abuse end. It was always, what can she find to break over my head, and I don't mean that as a metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean that in every literal sense. The things that she did to me, and you know what's the craziest part of like going back and thinking about it is anytime you bring it up to her, she was just like, "Don't talk about my past." What do you mean it's my past too? I'm a little confused here. And it would just always be, she's holier than thou and she could never do wrong. And I remember one time when she was going to therapy, she came back after her first session.
Air quotes twice.
Yeah. So first thing she says walking through the door, my therapist told me to tell you guys to stop talking about my past and stop this, stop that. I'm like, I don't think that's how therapists talk to their people. This is before I started going to therapy. So I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. Like, it sounds like you're just trying to make us seem like we're the bad people in this situation when we're not. And every time she would get called out on something, she did not like that. Funny story with her. So the biggest step in progress I've made with trying to mend my relationship with her was she stayed at my house for a week. Anybody who knows my relationship with my mom knows that that's a really big step for me because my mom and I don't get along. And she stayed at my house for an entire week. She wanted to drive my car to a friend's house to pick up some weed to smoke. Told her no. She wanted to tell her friend my address to drop it off. I said, absolutely not. One of the biggest things that she did, and this is big for me because obviously I told you about the tattoo thing. I have a mental health tattoo with 2 big semicolons and a heartbeat going next to the semicolons, and she wanted to get matching tattoos. I already had this done. She wanted to get a matching tattoo, and I said, absolutely not. She just kind of looked at me like, oh, you don't want me to have that tattoo? I'm like, Mom, this tattoo is unique to me. Get your own damn tattoo. And like, yeah, I guess I could have said it a little less harsh, but she was just trying to make it seem like that she's this great mother and that she's so proud of her kids whenever she's around strangers. She puts on a show. It's quite amazing. Like, you could probably make a movie out of the acting she does in front of strangers. But also to kind of add to what kind of person she is, she got recently remarried. She never told her now husband why her kids don't talk to her. She didn't say that she stole $4,000 from my sister. She didn't say that she made a really negative impact on my life. Like, none of that. It was just, oh, my kids don't talk to me. I'm not going to tell you why, kind of thing. So it's like, okay. I met him for the first time the other day over the phone, over video chat, because I wanted to call her and just make sure she's still alive.
It sounds like she really hurt you, or you have a lot of have to navigate through a lot of mother wounds. Do you feel like you still have to navigate through those?
I don't know if I so much have to navigate anymore because I know what to look out for. I know her behaviors. So it's just kind of like the second I pick up on even a little bit of a red flag, I'll cut her off. But I remember calling her on her birthday last year, and she was so shocked because we hadn't talked in like a year. And I'm like, I just wanted to call you for your 50th birthday because you deserve to hear that. I don't want you to think I don't care, because deep down I care. I don't feel great about my relationship with my mom, like I mentioned, but it's like she has zero accountability of the type of person she is. And
I heard that a lot from different people.
And it's it's sad that she's burned so many bridges with so many people, but there are people within my family who will keep her informed, and it drives me crazy because it's like, you guys tell me to put up boundaries, but you guys intrude those boundaries behind my back. And it's like, sometimes, and I told my dad this. I'm like, if I could remove her from my birth certificate, I would, because that's how ashamed I am that she's my mother sometimes.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point I wanted to just change my name completely because my whole entire family is just chaos.
Yeah.
You know?
I understand, like, especially when it comes down to like relationship with um your mom and stuff. Kind of had like similar a lot of the things that you mentioned, like I've experienced, and a lot of people do experience just the lack of accountability or um, just like also the blaming and things like that, and the yelling and all of that. Those things hurt, but there's still that part of you that wants that relationship, that child in you. A child wants their mother, a child wants their father, they want their parent, right? Even as an adult, it's like the what if is there, right? What if the relationship can be like this? But then at some point you come to the realization that it's almost like, sometimes I wonder, is it just like a loss of hope? But you come to that realization, it's just like, I'll never have that relationship that I've desired
Right.
forever to have, right? And then you just put those boundaries up. But there's a part of healing that we all have to go through, right? Some people say they heal from it'll stop hurting one day. My opinion or my perspective is that is a wound that
Never
it's
goes away.
always, yeah, it's just tender. It's always a tender, because that's your, you come from your mother's womb, right? Y'all are attached, right? Mothers birth their children, and that can hurt even years later, right? It can hurt. It
Right.
can hurt. And even as you talk, right? It somewhere in there it sounds like there is still a little inch of pain there, right? And
Always.
that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's your mother.
Right. And
That's
and
your mom.
I think the biggest thing, and this is also speaking on my dad too, because I grew up with basically a emotionally unavailable father. So,
Mhm.
again, kind of going back to when I first started therapy of just crying.
Yeah.
Um, never, never was taught how to be a man and how to share my feelings, because it wasn't done in the household. And if I did share what I was struggling with, my mom would use it against me as a weapon.
Mm,
And she did that for a really long time. She still does it every now and again.
yeah.
And it got to a point where I had to come to two realizations. The first one was I needed to stop chasing the validation of my dad, because for the longest time, and I mean the longest, from when I moved out on my own to now, I always wanted to hear the words "I'm proud of you" from him. Never once have I heard those words. I've seen him say it to my little brother. I've heard him say it to my sister. Never once has he said it to me.
Mm,
And I remember crying to my therapist. I don't know why I was crying about it. Like, the way that I look at me crying like that is like, that's my inner child just wanting to feel like I matter, wanting to feel like I give a shit to my parents. Because, and I still feel like this from time to time. It
mhm,
would take them finding me on the side of the road for them to care.
mm,
And I genuinely feel like that. And that's not coming from a place of I want to take my life or anything like
yeah.
that. That's coming from a place of my parents still to this day do not know I exist. And by that, I mean, when my dad calls me, he's there to talk about my brother and sister. He's there to tell me about whatever he's watching on Facebook or whatever is on the news or anything else. If you ask me how I'm doing, it's never a genuine question. He's going to put that in there, but then he's going to talk over you after you try to answer.
No.
And then the second realization I came to was my mom is never going to change no matter how bad her life gets. She's always going to find the next person to manipulate, the next person to use, and the next person to tell lies to. And that was part of my healing. That, it sounds weird to phrase it like that, but for me, it was the biggest pill I've ever had to swallow of both of my parents, because my dad, and this is actually recently, we went on a cruise in August, went to the Bahamas, St. Martin, and St. Thomas. And the sights, like take out the family happenings that happened then, the sights were amazing. It was so nice to be out in the sun, be out in the water, and experience the island environment. Before we went out on the cruise, I was at my grandma's house, and my dad was there. And he got up and went to go to his room, maybe to lay down, didn't feel good, whatever. And I remember going to say goodbye to him. I hugged my grandma, and then I walked to his room, and I knocked on the door. And, the door was open. And when I went to go say bye to him, he has a popsicle stick in his hand and up to his nose. And I pretended like I didn't see it. And I just kind of quickly turned around and walked away. I called my brother freaking out. Like a little kid that just watched their dad do something horrific. And it was very horrific to me because I've never seen drug use like that. And I said, should I say something to him? Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm really upset about this. And he's like, I would call him out and whatnot. And my friend told me not to. And I called him the first time, he didn't answer. Then I called him the second time, we had a conversation. And I said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm stupid. I saw what happened. I don't know why you're doing it. And I want you to know that it hurt me a lot. And I'm not here to judge you. I've had friends that have overdosed because that stuff has been laced. And you doing that did things to me I can't properly explain. And he just kind of was really receptive to the call. He's like, that's why I ignored the first call, because I knew that's why you were calling. And he's like, I feel really bad. And I promise you I'll never do that again. And it was a one-time thing. I had it from a friend and didn't want to get rid of it, blah, blah, blah. And just, it was really hard to go on a cruise for a week with him, knowing that had happened. And being around an entire family that doesn't really give two shits about me.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a really big part of my journey, is trying to navigate how much I talk to my little sister. And I don't have anything ill to say about my little sister. I love her to death, and I will do anything for her. But her and I don't have that relationship because my mom damaged that relationship a lot. Mm-hmm. We're getting there. We're getting there. My brother and him and I talk a lot more than we have. But it got to a point where any kind of family event, whether it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, I was just there. This past Christmas, we didn't do Thanksgiving because of something that happened. We had a Christmas dinner, and I didn't feel like I was there. Nobody asked me how I'm doing. Nobody asked me how life is going. And it's a lonely journey. It truly is healing. And for listeners, I'm not saying this in any negative way. Healing is a very lonely journey, but it is the most redeeming journey too. You discover so much about yourself. You discover how much light you have to offer the world. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that I've learned about myself is how much I have to give.
So that's how your experience shaped how you see yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said that healing is a lonely journey. It's so funny because I tell people the opposite. I always tell people, well, it doesn't have to be a lonely journey. I started Take My Hand because you don't have to go through healing alone. You don't have to. There's support around you, there's family around you, and then there's faith. Faith is a key, critical piece to healing in the process. Healing is a process. Healing's not overnight. And I know when you said it's a lonely journey, it's like, man, you feel like you're by yourself, or maybe nobody understands, or I'm going through this by myself. And while
So
you, go ahead.
I want to, I guess, kind of clarify my statement on the lonely statement. So many people become accustomed to the versions of ourself that we were before we start healing, right? So many people are invested in the person that you are before you start your healing journey, that when you get to be that healthy version of yourself, oh, you've changed. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're not around as much. Oh, and the conversation changes with so many people that were in your circle. I don't think having a small circle is bad by any means, because you realize how many people are there to ride and die for you. And by the lonely statement, I mean so more as you have to be willing to do the work yourself. Yes, there's that support.
Yeah.
Yes, there's people to lean on, but those people aren't going to always be there to lean on, and that's why you got to be that person to do the work. Nobody's gonna make that phone call to that therapist to make that first appointment for you. Nobody's gonna be there for you when you're lashing out and you're angry and you don't want to change. When you want to change, there's a lot of people that want to help you start, but there are very few people that want to stick by your side through that entire journey. And for me, that was my experience going through therapy. And these last couple of years, I've had friends that I was friends with for over 10, 15 years that just don't like the person that I am, because I see things in a perspective that they don't want to see. They're so stuck in their storm that they don't want to see that there's sunshine over here. And I know sometimes it's hard to see past that tunnel, and it's hard to see the light. But if you're looking close enough in those little crevices, there's always going to be that light there. You just got to be willing to want to see it.
What role did faith or community play in your healing process?
So in about 2019, I had created the mental health group that eventually led to this podcast, and it came off of this post that I did on this page called Suicide Prevention Rocks. And I made a post just kind of telling my story. I'm like, you know what? I want to share my story, and this is the place I want to start. The post itself got about like 600 and something likes, like within 24 hours. And I think it was their most engaged post in, probably like a couple months. So I started making a little bit more posts, and they kind of just let it go for a little while. And I had somebody reach out who had their own like little nonprofit. Their husband had taken their life, and he had a foundation, and he had a blog and everything that he posted on. And he asked me if I wanted to start writing for them. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be great. I would love to get on a blog and tell my story. That'd be incredible. It was their way of filtering me out of their engagement. And it took me about a month to figure that out. They weren't posting the blogs I was writing. They would sit there pending for weeks and not move. So I created my own group. And
Wow.
when I created the group, they kicked me out of the blog. They kicked me off of that group, and they asked me, "Oh, did you start your own mental health group?" I'm like, "Yeah, you guys weren't posting anything I was writing. Like, I'm trying to get my story out there too, and you're shutting me down." And they didn't like that. I had basically a huge disagreement with them, and it's just like, aren't we here to do the same thing? Talk
Mhm.
about mental health? What are we doing? So I created the group, and I'm confident to say we have over 1,800 members now. Cheap plug, thank you. Um, and they helped me through so much before I started therapy again, because I had a bad experience when I first moved down to Florida with a therapist who tried to prescribe me pills after the second session and just didn't write anything down and just didn't really seem to care.
Is that a psychiatrist?
Yeah, I guess she was a psychiatrist, but I told her I don't believe in pills. I don't want that, and had a really bad experience with them. So I didn't do therapy for about a year, and I had the group to lean on for a while. And people were starting to tell their stories, and I started telling more of mine. And then we made the group public, and more people started posting. More people started telling their story, and we all leaned on each other. And when the things were really bad with my mom, they were there before Jess was. And then Jess came along, and the group got bigger because the inspiration got heavier. The conversation was louder.
Yeah.
And the voice of all of those people started speaking to other people. And it finally grew into what it grew into. And community, I think, is the most important part of healing. And I truly believe that they are my family.
I love that. I love that you're able to bounce back after your. It seems like they were trying to silence you or keep you
Yeah.
silenced, right? And I love your shirt, by the way. You are enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
You took the steps to say, you know what, I'm gonna do this anyway. Because just think about that person that would have happened to, and they would have just went back into the cave,
Yeah.
or went back into just be quiet. It's hard for people to speak up already and talk about these topics that make them seem vulnerable, right? And then you have somebody that tries to shut you down and quiet you. That can be very intimidating. And then that question pops up, well, this is why I wasn't going to say anything in the first place,
Right.
right? But I'm
Right.
glad that you kept going
Me
and
too.
that you started your group. And now you have your podcast, Voice for the Voiceless, which I'm pretty sure that it makes great impact, and it's a way to advocate, right?
Yeah.
So how would you say sharing your story impacts the lives of others?
So when I first started telling my story, and when I started doing it on the podcast started out as just an informational podcast. It wasn't meant to be anything more than me finding a mental health topic and just reading definitions and telling my story and how those specific things impacted me.
Mm-hmm.
Then it grew to getting guests on there and being able to bounce off of each other and telling each other stories. And I've interviewed CEOs of nonprofits all the way to musicians to therapists to holistic healers. And that all started with me telling my story, me being able to have not only the confidence, but having that integrity and having that focus enough to make sure that everybody's being taken care of while at the same time taking care of myself.
Mm.
And I feel that's the hardest thing to do, right? It's the hardest thing to do is to make sure that we're okay with the person in the mirror. We're okay with giving our shirts off our back and making sure that somebody else has clothes. We're perfectly okay just taking care of everybody else. But most of us who have a big heart put ourselves in positions of helping others, but not ourselves.
Ooh, that's a combo right there.
Yeah.
That's the conversation right there. It's hard to keep the shirt on your back.
Right.
Can you do that for
Right.
yourself?
And I
So,
think the hardest part is saying no. And I have a really bad problem of saying no to everybody I help. And
still,
not as often as I used to, but it definitely, somebody can con me enough to saying yes. I have a really empathetic heart, and I don't like to see anybody struggle. So it's like I was that person once asking for help and nobody reached out their hand to me. I want to be that person for everybody else. And still learning those boundaries for myself of, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this for this person because they're using you, or maybe you shouldn't do this for this person because they're taking advantage of your heart. And sometimes I don't want to see that. And sometimes people just know how to play the game better than what you've experienced before.
it's almost like they prey on it. The
Yeah.
people. Yeah. It's okay to say no. I'm going to encourage you to practice it. It's definitely okay to say no.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a whole sentence. No, period.
Yep.
With no explanation. No. That's okay. We need to normalize that.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give people who's currently in a situation that you experienced? Anybody facing, grief, death, just growing up in a household the way you did?
I'm going to give the best advice that I've ever been given in my entire life, and that was from my therapist. Be gentle with yourself, because we are so harsh on our own selves, whether it's self-destruction, whether it's beating ourselves up, and like I was just doing, beating myself up for saying yes to everybody. And be gentle with yourselves and give yourself grace. We are all human beings. We are all allowed to make mistakes. Don't give up, because getting through that brick wall will be the first step of healing. But that wall will come down. Don't give up. Keep swinging. Keep swimming.
I love that. Don't give up. Keep swimming. Yes. How do you stay motivated and continue to grow beyond
So
the challenges that you face?
funny story. Well, yeah, funny little thing. I was telling my brother, I said, I'm struggling with motivation. I just recently had somebody take advantage of me and was really down on myself about it. And I had a podcast yesterday with somebody based out of Arizona. She's an innovator in childcare and recovery. And after I got done with that podcast, I told my brother, I said, if I ever don't have full 100% motivation for a podcast, regardless of the guest, I want you to punch me in the face. And I laughed. I said, this is one of the best conversations I've ever had, and you could feel her heart. That's what keeps me motivated. Seeing how much people care about what they're doing makes me want to keep doing what I'm doing, because I get to hear it. I get to experience it. And I think one of the hardest things when I first started this journey was comparing myself to people. Oh, well, I didn't go through what they went through, so what I went through doesn't matter. My attempts don't matter because they weren't as detailed or as graphic. And I had to keep telling myself, listen, your story is just as valid as somebody else. A sprained leg is just the same as a broken leg. They both hurt. They're not the same type of injury, but they both hurt. And when we can have the conversation of everything is the same, as long as you look at somebody else and look across the table that is also experiencing trauma and telling their story, and you guys don't have to have the same story, and that's okay. I've heard so many different stories, and I love every single one of them, and I could probably tell you almost every single one of them have inspired me in some sort. But when you have, I'll give you a good example of one of the most inspiring women I've ever met in my life. Um, she's a CEO of a nonprofit that helps with homeless people. She is paralyzed from the neck down, and one of the most positive and loving human beings I've ever met in my life. And I was telling my brother, I said, maybe life isn't that bad. Like, she is so optimistic and her heart is still freaking so loving. And that's what keeps me motivated to keep doing this, because I meet so many amazing people, you being one of them. And I truly think that when we can all share that kindness, when we can all share that heart with each other, that's what makes these conversations so much better.
Yeah. I hear people, they'll say that. They'll say things like, oh, they'll say, mine wasn't like that. It wasn't that bad. And it's like, are you comparing? It's a thing. People do that. And I think you're right. Like, an injury is an injury. And if there's an injury, there needs to be healing.
Yeah.
Healing is healing. The details of the injury may look different, but an injury is an injury. And they say that, no one thing is more significant than the next, right? Perspective.
I always
Perspective.
laugh when I hear people say that when the best advice that they think is life isn't that bad when you can look and see that somebody is homeless or somebody's this, somebody's that. I'm like, okay, so then I can use that advice against you and say, don't be happy because other people have it better. See how that works? You know what I mean? Like, I understand what you're trying to say, but it's not it.
Like, ah. That was a good one. That
So
was a
true.
good one.
It's so true.
I'm glad that you have people that motivate you. One of my stories, I've never met her, but what is her name? Bethany Hamilton, the girl from Soul Surfer.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched the movie. Have you seen that with the shark?
I've heard of it.
With they bit her arm off. The shark bit her arm, and she went back to continue surfing. Now that is a true story. And at the end of that movie, they played the clips of the real. I think her name is Bethany, and it is just so inspiring. And I get motivated, and I'm like, man, if somebody like her, she was a young girl, can be injured and get up and continue to do the thing that she loved and impact and inspire other people, I can too.
Yeah.
Motivation, right? Okay, so where can people connect with you, or support the work that you're doing? Your Voice of the Voiceless, any books or anything?
So no books. That's something I've considered. Haven't really solidified that idea just yet. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of exposure, if any. I'm on TikTok. You can find me on there, Voice for the Voiceless. Also on every listening platform and YouTube. And you can find me on Facebook. The Facebook group is Mental Health Movement. It has a picture of a fist with the semicolon on it. Pretty easy to find. And on Instagram, it's Mental Health Movement Pod. So you can find me on there too.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your story. I think you have a powerful story. There are so many powerful stories out here, and we need to hear them. Your story, your lack of silence, right? You have a bold voice that will help other people, one, speak up. And you just never know what's in your story that's going to help somebody else, right? You telling your story could be the very thing that somebody needs to get up and you say, you know what? I'm going to set that boundary. I'm going to go get that therapy. I'm going to get up. I'm not going to commit suicide. I'm going to go get the help that I need. And we just never know how it will impact somebody years down the road. So I want to thank you, Chris, for coming here today
Thank you.
to share your story.
Appreciate you having me on.
All right, you all. So thank you all for tuning in to Survivor Talks with Vanity. We will see you next week on the next episode. Stay tuned for the next guest.
Take care, guys.